Hello, students. I'm excited to have you in this class. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending upon when you're watching this. Really varies when you found the time to watch this video. So I'm going to be covering the first lecture here as we get going down the path of this interesting but complicated but interesting topic of research methods. So bear with me as we go through this lecture. It's giving you kind of a lot of information at once, and then we'll be going into variations of specialization as we go within the different lectures. This is kind of going to be the format you're used to with me on this class, where I'll be a floating head using my slides as the backdrop. So if you've come into this class in a similar manner as me when I was an undergrad, excited to learn about sociology because you are usually in awe of the social life, then this is going to be a lot of fun to learn how to go about analyzing and conducting research. For those of you who are not, it'll still be important for you depending what field you go into. I was a former director of research business development. I worked in the sales world. This stuff matters, especially in almost every field you're in, right? So let's start talking about this, about how to go about analyzing and conducting social research. This lecture covers basics that we will dive deeper into as we go throughout this course, right? We will learn to speak this language as we proceed. So I'll be introducing and continually using a lot of terminology in the next several weeks, and that's going to be starting right now, right? Research helps us learn about the world around us. So how do we know what we already know about? Well, most of us know what we know because is a matter of believing in what we have been told. That is, we agree with others, right? We agree with those we respect. And this breaks down into the idea of how do we know what we know? Well, first off, knowledge is socially constructed. Knowing what we know is also based on knowing who we trust and who we've been primarily socialized by, parents, or secondarily socialized by friends, or what we consume, media, right? We get this knowledge from a few different places, such as direct experiences and observations that we make by seeing things happen traditionally and through tradition and by authority. Tradition and authority both come through secondhand knowledge, meaning somebody else is talking to us. We first accept that what everyone knows, so we don't have to try to start from scratch. Why would you reinvent the wheel is an old expression, right? In our own understanding of the world. So to reiterate that, we first accept everyone knows, so we don't have to start from scratch in our own understandings of the world, and we rely on authority through discoveries and understanding produced by others who are trusted, right? And that's a big conversation about trust. How do we get our data, right? But the earth revolves around the sun. That's something we can generally agree on, right? That wasn't always the case back in antiquated times, right? So we've started to trust that this is a good thing. Or if you've ever met someone who's a flat earther, you start seeing where we start dissuading or discrediting people who do not follow what we agree is the collective information. People generally are social beings who rely on each other. It's part of our nature. Capitalist societies rely on strong economies. Just look at Marx's work. It's the base of economy, right? There are dog people and there are cat people. And then there's something in between like me who just loves all floofs, right? When we rely on authority, scientists follow criteria that must be met before they can accept as a new reality, right? Epistemology, which we'll cover on this slide right here, right, is the knowledge or the science of knowing. We have to have this. While methodology is the science of finding out. Our class is regularly centered on methodology, aka the science of finding out. We want to gain the tools to find out new things about our social world. We generally answer what and why questions through methods and recognize patterns such as future circumstances are caused by what we want to do in the present time. These patterns that surface are probabilistic. That is, there is general regularity, but the pattern does not need to be reflected in 100% of the cases. So irregularity may be that people 18 and older can vote, or only people with licenses can drive a car. When we are conducting human inquiry, there are some errors that arise, and this is where we start knowing how to limit these. And these can include inaccurate observations, right? We need to start understanding what these things can happen from, whether it be inaccurate observations, when we don't record our observations correctly, and are wrong in what we are observing. You can look at Thomas theorem, right? A reality is real to someone subjectively, bad or good, right? But that doesn't mean the objective truth is there. It's just because of our perception. So we need to not have inaccurate observations. Instead, we must have measurement devices and precision that must overcome these inaccuracies. Overgeneralization, when we make too many connections to larger groups based on what we see In smaller, more specific or specialized groups, for instance, we can overcome this by replication when we repeat the study to make sure they have the same results and are produced the same time, no matter who does it. Selective observation can occur if we are only looking in one place and keep finding the same results. Instead, to overcome this, we must make an effort to find cases that don't fit in the general pattern we keep seeing and the illogical reasoning happening when we come to a faulty conclusion based on our observations. So now you're looking at these ideas: inaccurate observation, selective observation, illogical reasoning, probabilistic, right? Patterns are based on regularities, and overgeneralizations. And this is where we start seeing certain emphases that are super important. Now, what I'm going to have you do in a second here is I'm going to have you pause your screen once I've read this question to you that you saw for 2 seconds when I switched slides. This is a multiple choice question. And what I want you to do is as follows, right? We need to use these systems of logic explicitly and be purposeful. Now reflect on this multiple choice question. You've gotten A's on the last 3 tests, and you have a research project due the last day of class, and you're sure you're going to fail because the streak you're on has to come to an end. It has to break, right? You have fallen prey to which of the human inquiries? Now, please pause this video to reflect on your answer and maybe reread the question because maybe you didn't understand me. And then when you're ready to go forward, hit play and you'll see the answer. But pause the video, read the question, and make your selection. All right, hopefully you paused it and took a guess. Either way, you're going to see the answer. And the answer is as such, right? The correct answer here is illogical reasoning because the scenario presents a faulty conclusion that is not accurate. A scientific understanding of the world must make sense and correspond with what observations we need, both logic and observation, as they are both essential and relate to 3 major aspects of the overall scientific enterprise: theory, data collection, and data analysis. Now, as we're kind of looking forward in this class, we're going to talk a lot about different things. There's a ton of stuff on this slide, but we will get into much more detail about the topics that we've discussed later in lecture. But for now, a brief overview of the terms that include as following, and they're on your slide right here. Theory, which is a systematic explanation for the observations we see. Aggregates are the collective actions and situations of many individuals. In my intro class that I teach here at Arizona State University, I talk about aggregates a lot because I talk about group dynamics. So this might be a throwback for any of you who took my intro or if you have taken intro, right? So the focus on social sciences explain why aggregated patterns of behavior are regular, even when individuals change over time. Right? We collect data through defining variables with their attributes. Now, variables are logical groupings of attributes, and attributes are characteristics that describe an object. Let me say that one more time just quickly for you. Variables are logical groupings of attributes, and attributes are characteristics that describe an object. So what the heck, right? So what are some variables and their potential attributes? Well, on your slide are a few. Age is a variable, and the attributes can be such things as 7, 18, 25, 41, or 88. Or we could also define age by listing categories, which you'll see a lot on surveys that could fall into such 0 out of 3, 4 out of 12, 13 out of 17, 18 out of 24, 25 out of 34, 35 to 44, or 45 to 60, and then 60 and above. Another variable you could use is that of gender. Now, traditionally, social scientists and market researchers and the like have had 2 attributes for gender: male and female, man or woman. However, we are now seeing additional categories to represent a more diverse groupings of people, such as gender nonconforming, transgender women, transgender men, cisgender women, cisgender men, and multiple genders. Also in Germany, they allow an X for non-binary or intersex, which is one of the things they do in the beginning to help medical malpractice not happen. See, even in medicine, you'll start seeing why these things matter when we do different data collections and the importance of having authenticity and validity, right? So again, you can see how human inquiry and what we agree on as a knowledge is in fact socially constructed and can change. Now, for point of this conversation, we're going to go to the next slide here, which is we're going to start talking about the knowledge base. Keeping with our knowledge base is important for researchers to continually explore the social world. How might reasoning impact our research process? Let's talk about this. we can take an inductive or deductive approach. They're on the screen right here for you to read, but inductive reasoning is the logical model in which general principles are developed from specific observation, meaning observation to patterns, to tentative hypothesis, to a theory, and then it is looked at a bottom-up approach, right? An example of this could be that I drop a pen and it fell to the ground. Every time I drop something out of my hand, it falls to the ground. I come up with the idea that I can test and conclude that it will support my theory of gravity. On the flip side, deductive reasoning is the logical model in which specific expectations of hypotheses are developed on the basis of general principles. We go from general to more specific in a top-down approach, right? Basically, theory to hypothesis to observation to confirmation. So if I was to give you an example of this, I can choose to test the theory of gravity. I make a hypothesis. If I drop something, it'll fall to the ground. I drop an object out of my hand and they just happen to fall to the ground. Theory confirmed, right? So now we're looking at this idea of understanding the basis, the whole front of how we can look at this idea of inductive and deductive reasoning. Now, the next step here that we want to go down is the idea of different types of research processes. Now, we're going to talk about nomothetic explanations as well as idiographic explanations and research purposes. And this is extremely important for our information here. But let's start with idiographic rather than nomothetic. There are several types of explanations that we can seek, such as the idiographic explanation is an approach where we see to exhaust the idiosyncratic or unique causes of a particular condition or one event, right? When we aim to fully and completely understand the given situation, our scope has very limited and only focused on the one instance, and typically idiographic explanations use qualitative data, where we are collecting deep, rich data that is detailed and not only strictly numerical on basis, but it does tend to have a little bit more focus on this side. In-depth interviews, ethnographic researches, and participant observations are some of the methods we'll explore that are most often done idiographic. So you see a little bit of this idea of participant observation. This field I study, deviant studies, tends to have a lot of idiographic data explanations because it's hard to get the information by doing interviews, but doing surveys, not interviews. So nomothetic explanations are those we seek to identify a few causal or correlative factors that impact a class or of conditions or events. These are more in the general range, should I say, of observations from different situations, and the outcome is partial explanations since we can't fully exhaust multiple instances and situations. Typically, with data collection, it is quantitative. So remember, qual is more about in-depth interviews. Quan is more number strict. That is, we are looking at the numbers and statistics to make observations. Surveys and secondary data analysis are two methods that sociologists often use for nomothetic approaches. And the purpose of social research, it includes exploratory, descriptive, and explanatory reasons. So this idea of exploration studies maps out the topics that will not be studied much at all in the past so that we may do further studies on them later, which continues the process of research, right? So exploratory studies answers who, descriptive studies answer what, by describing the state of social affairs. For example, I'll give you a little bit about information about me. When I was working as a market researcher, we would explore studies to answer the who for companies when not-for-profit organizations were curious how to interact or with interactions, connect and better market to their donors, members, and we'd show them who was the general donor and how to better target their businesses and loyalty. The US Census collects data every 10 years, is a great example of descriptive studies to locate what population is made up in regards of how many of us are living and using within one area, the resources in each area, and what our societal makeup is. Explanatory seeks to answer why. And here researchers are looking for the causal relationship and providing reasons why phenomena occur. Once again, when the donations or lifetime donations would drop, companies would seek out consultants such as my company to look into why and provide insights to better allow annual incomes or the annual reoccurring revenue, ARR, to increase and their donations to not drop off. Social psychologists research many different factors, and we'll discuss in more detail when we talk about ethics, and our great examples of explanatory studies, as they'll attempt to show the importance of why and group dynamics. Essentially, you're going to get an understanding of this, right? Exploratory, descriptive, and explanatory. Now, there's tons of interesting and important factors to be said here, right? But we'll be able to go about that later. We'll see this play out more in evaluation research and prevention measures, or research to support social change efforts, or the research to support a community. Just a couple examples. For now, think about how we use logic and observations to come to conclusions about the world, because it becomes very important that if we do not have an understanding of why things happen, that we just allow the idea of the bystander effect to happen, that they just do happen, right? That we are victim to our circumstances, not that our circumstances are controlled by us. In your intro class, you might have learned about a famous theorist named Lenski. Lenski said that as civilizations evolved, it's based upon our ability to control the environment, not the environment controlling us, right? Those who are controlled by the environment are rudimentary technologies or civilizations. So research methods, these tactics, this ability to use logic and observation allows us to better our structure, right? So I hope this has been informative to you. I know it's a little bit long. Some of these will be because we're covering important topics. Have some fun contemplating topics that you'd like to study that have to do with your interests in sociology, as you'll be working on that throughout this course, and find out if you want to do inductive or deductive research. Do you want to use quantitative or qualitative measures? If you're to use qualitative, how are you going to do the interviews? If you use quantitative, how are you distributing the information to gain the data? Or are you using secondary research? That's it for me now. I'll see you next lecture, and I hope that this helped you gain some insight towards human inquiry. I'll see you next lecture. Thank you so much.